Writing the West. Stories and poems by Rick Steber. Read by Michael Messner and friends. Dolbeer's Donkey. John Dolbeer came west in the gold rush of 1850. After a few months searching for gold, he found greater potential for wealth in supplying the miners with lumber. He and a partner began a logging and sawmill operation in the redwood country of Northern California. John's contribution to the partnership was his ability to engineer machinery. In the sawmill, he replaced the slow up-and-down gang saw by inventing a high-speed circular saw, and later further streamlined the cutting operation with a band saw, an endless steel belt with razor-sharp teeth capable of cutting at a high speed with minimal waste. Perhaps John's greatest innovation occurred in 1881 when he brought mechanization to the woods by inventing a small maneuverable steam engine that provided power to turn a drum. A steel cable was attached to the drum, and logs were winched to a central landing. This device became known as Dolbeer's Donkey, and later the name was shortened to just Donkey. By the turn of the century, every logging operation of any size had replaced the oxen and horses that had been employed to drag logs over skid rows with a Dolbeer's Donkey. The machines remained powerful until the 1930s, when the internal combustion engine made the donkey obsolete. White feather. In the early 1800s, the English language had numerous cliches and sayings that gradually went out of fashion. One such phrase came from the competitive game of cockfighting, where a white feather in a bird's tail was considered a sign of inferior breeding. The phrase "showing the white feather" came to be known as a sign of cowardice. In his reminiscences, James Neal related an experience he had on the Oregon Trail in 1848. His party was coming down through buffalo country along the Platte River when James wrote that
a large buffalo bull coming down on the opposite side of the river, making for a low range of hills some half-mile distance on our side of the river. As I had never killed a buffalo entirely by myself, I was seized with the idea of killing him in order to say that I had indeed killed a buffalo. Well, with this in view, I took an English smooth-bore flint-lock musket instead of my rifle of small bore, on account of its carrying a larger ball to execute my fell purpose. Having taken note of the direction of the bull was taking towards some hills, I laid my course so as to intercept him and proceed about 3/4 of a mile as I raised up on top of one of the ridges. And there was Mr. Bull, about 20 yards off, broadside on. And I raised my musket and pulled the trigger, and down came the hammer with a crash. But as the wind was blowing fresh right in my teeth, missed fire. Now the sound made Mr. Bull aware of my presence. The shaggy monster stopped and glared at me. Instantly, 1,000 recollections of tales of a wounded bull in pursuit of a bad marksman flashed through me.
Neal said that he doubted he would be able to run the 3/4 of a mile between himself and camp. He apologized to the bull, said it had all been a mistake, and that he intended no insult. Neal went his way, and the buffalo went its own way. He confessed that that day he was guilty of showing the white feather. No, Nevermind. He pays absolutely no nevermind to the clumsy fly walking the window glass, to the flag snapping at attention, tugging at the line on the pole, fluttering and flapping in the wind, to the flash of ultramarine blue as the stellar jay settles on a branch, making it swing back and forth. to the skunk poking its nose from the warm, cozy den, anxious for meal and a mate, to dusk come early this day, to the pickup truck creeping over the hill, headlights bouncing up and down like confused thoughts. He is up early to meet a bright new day. Once more, inertia fails and he tumbles back into bed. He figures it is all, no, never mind. Hugh Glass. It is believed that Hugh Glass was once a pirate on the Spanish Main, that he jumped ship, traveled overland, and lived with the Pawnee. He made his way to St. Louis, Missouri, and joined Ashley and Henry's Rocky Mountain Fur Company in 1823. Glass was already in his 40s. He was much older than most of the other mountain men. On his first trip into the mountains, Glass was mauled by a grizzly. There was little his companions could do for him except to make him comfortable. They waited for him to die, but Glass wouldn't give in. Henry told his men,
"Now he's going to die. Now we all know that. If we stay with him, we eat into our fall trapping season, and we can't just leave him. Now I'm asking for volunteers, and I need 2 men who will stay with him until he dies. Give him a decent burial, and then catch up to us."
2 men volunteered, young Jim Bridger and Fitzgerald. The trapping party departed, and after a few days, Fitzgerald grew restless and talked Bridger into abandoning Glass.
I'll forget it.
Good luck, buddy.
Glass refused to die in camp and began crawling. When he came to a stream, he drank. He dug roots and picked berries. Slowly, he began to regain his strength. He used a branch as a cane and was able to walk. Glass made his way several hundred miles to Fort Henry, where he confronted Bridger, but he could not bring himself to kill a boy. He turned his attention to finding Fitzgerald, tracking him to Council Bluffs. Once again, Glass was unable to satisfy his revenge. Fitzgerald had joined the army, and Glass refused to kill a United States soldier. Glass returned to trapping. He was working a tributary of the Yellowstone River when he was killed by natives. His luck had finally run out. Old Man's Story. Louis Labonte was an old man when the wagon emigrants began to arrive in the Willamette Valley of Oregon. He enjoyed sitting in his rocker on the porch of his cabin, spinning stories for the pioneer children. One day he told,
"I came by a sailing ship to the mouth of the Columbia River in the employ of John Jacob Astor's Pacific Fur Company. I took an Indian bride, Little Songbird. I was one of the first farmers west of the Mississippi. I remember the way Indians hunted deer. In order to get close enough to kill a deer with an arrow, the Indian hunter would get down on all fours and drape the head and hide of a deer over his body. He would come up on a herd of deer, acting as if he was grazing, and even would occasionally jerk the deer's head from side to side as if driving away flies. Before long, the buck would spot the intruder and commence a stamping and snorting. All the while, the Indian would be working his way closer and closer. Finally, the buck, shaken with excitement, would offer a challenge to fight. The imposter would move in the buck's direction, and within maybe 60 feet, the hunter would rise up, throw off his disguise, and release an arrow. You don't see Indians around much anymore. Nope. Country's getting way too dang civilized."
Labonte lived to witness Oregon become the 33rd state admitted to the Union. He died the following year in 1860 and was buried in a cemetery near his farm. You've been listening to Writing the West. The stories and poetry in this podcast are by Rick Stieber and appear in Books by Him. Log on to www.rickstieberauthor.com to find out more. This program was produced by Michael Messner by permission of the author. Special thanks to Michael Tucker, Rachel Pulliam, and Art Shingler. Thank you for listening.